Hello, hello, everybody. It is so nice to have you with us virtually. It is a gorgeous day in Florida. You can see I'm in this beautiful Florida scrub habitat, surrounded by just the most beautiful habitat I could imagine. You might be able to see behind me there. I don't know if you can see some of the buildings in the distance from Archbold Station. If you have never been here before, you're new to Archbold, we are a field station. And it's kind of like if you combined a nature preserve and a college or university and a science museum and a historical site, wrapped them all up together, that would give you Archbold. We have 20,000 acres in the heart of Florida. We're not on the coast, and we're in the middle of Florida. And researchers that are studying endangered species, looking at things like fire and its role in the habitat and ecosystem, looking at water issues in Florida, climate and weather, all kinds of good things here in the middle of Florida. But today we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about Florida, of course, but we also have special guests coming from Texas. So I'll be live here and they're going to be out there. And we thought it would be fun to just highlight some of the species in both places that are similar. So the way it will work is we're going to be sharing short video clips about certain species. And then also some of the time we'll be live. We'll do that for the first 45 minutes. After that, we have a panel of researchers that will answer your questions. So if you stick around after that for another 15 to 20 minutes, you can ask all kinds of questions about these species or about the habitats and ecosystems here in Texas. We've got researchers from both sites that'll be on with us. So that should be pretty fun. So let's think about our theme today. There's a good reason for comparing species here in the middle of Florida and some of the species that you find out in Texas. And to get to that reason, we need to imagine we're in a time machine. Let's go back 20,000 years. And you might be thinking, well, Dustin, wasn't that in like the height of the last ice age? Yes, about 20,000 years ago is the height of the ice age. And if you lived in, say you're living in New York, upstate New York, where I'm from, there would have been an ice sheet about a mile thick right there covering all of that. And across much of the northern hemisphere, there were these giant ice sheets. Where did the water come from? Well, it came from the ocean. So when that water from the ocean got locked up in all these glaciers and ice sheets, the ocean, the sea levels were much lower. They dropped down. Just like now with climate change, the sea levels are starting to rise. During the ice age, they were much, much lower. So if we look at an outline of the United States today, and we see Florida and the Gulf, and we see Texas over there, we have to imagine the sea level 120 meters lower. That's about 400 feet lower. It's a very different outline. And what you had was different kinds of habitats that connected it all. You had things like this, scrub and savanna, low open vegetation habitats, and you had species, plants and animals that you could find throughout that whole zone. After the ice age ended and things changed around, particularly because the Mississippi, which had been locked up in a bunch of, the glaciers had changed what the Mississippi was doing. Once that got, going down there again, it separated us. And what you ended up in Florida is a little bit of the West that got stuck out here in the East. Here's a good example right here in front of me, this beautiful flower. This is a phase paleofoxia. And they're, just gorgeous flower that you find in the Florida scrub here. But you also find other species of paleofoxia out west. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at some of the species here, some of the species out west. So let's have our folks from the East Foundation hop on, get their videos up here, and they can introduce themselves and they've got an intro video to show you.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Masi. I am the educator for the East Foundation, and I am here on the San Antonio Viejo Ranch. This ranch is approximately 150,000 acres. To give you an idea of scale, 1 acre is the size of 1 football field. So at the East Foundation, our mission is to promote the advancement of land stewardship through ranching, science, and education. So we actually have a cattle operation here on our ranches. Total, we have 217,000 acres across 6 different ranches. And we have that cattle operation. We also conduct wildlife research. And then we do special events like this with our education. And so we are excited that you all are joining us, whether it's through Zoom or Facebook. And so we're going to go ahead and play our introduction video to give you a little bit more information about the East Foundation.
Welcome to the East Foundation. I'm Neil Wilkins, President and CEO of the Foundation. Just like you, we love Texas and its wide open spaces. As Texans, it's in our nature to care for the land, water, and wildlife. This makes us not only Texans, but land stewards. Simply put, anyone who cares for our land, water, and wildlife is a land steward. The East Foundation was created through a generous gift of the East family in 2007. To honor their legacy, we uphold their values that were established over 100 years ago. Like many early settlers, the East family worked hard. They believed in the importance of good, sound land stewardship and wildlife conservation, and held on to those values throughout their lives. Here at the East Foundation, we support land stewardship by managing our lands responsibly, as well as serving as a living laboratory. With 6 ranches, covering 217,000 acres in deep South Texas, we are able to study many native species, such as white-tailed deer, coyotes, and the endangered ocelot, while also producing quality protein through our cattle operation. As part of our mission, field lessons on our El Sauz and San Antonio Viejo ranches allow students to connect with the natural world while learning about ranching, wildlife, and land stewardship. While the need for social distancing keeps us from hosting out on the land, we hope to see you very soon. To bring a little nature into your day, Masi, Molly, and Mrs. Velador, along with some of our field experts, will take you on virtual field lessons we offer this semester. Until we see you out on the ranch, enjoy and happy learning.
Oh, that was great. I have never been able to go to the East Foundation. We've met them. They've been out to Archbold, and they're wonderful people. Watching that video, I'm adding it to the bucket list. I need to get out there. Looks so beautiful. The first species we're going to take a look at is the Florida scrub jay. This is probably the most famous species here. It's kind of our ambassador for the Florida scrub habitat. The Florida scrub jay is only found in Florida. It's endemic. It's a federally protected species, and it loves this kind of habitat, what you're seeing right here. Low and open, fire-maintained habitats. And we have a full 20-minute video on our YouTube page. We're just going to watch the first about 4 minutes of this video. So we're going to pop the video up right now, but we'll put the link in the chat too, so you can check out the whole video later. And then after this, we'll take a look at the green jays that are out in Texas.
Welcome to the Florida scrub ecosystem at Archbold Biological Station on the Lake Wales Ridge of Central Florida. Together we're going to explore a true native of the Florida scrub. It's brash, boisterous, and blue. Any guesses? The Florida scrub jay. The story of the Florida scrub jay fascinates everyone, with its tales of fire, hidden acorns, and ancient islands. As we explore deeper and deeper into the scrub, watch out for screen trivia like this. Florida scrub jays are intelligent birds with distinct raspy calls. They are closely related to crows, who are also super smart. Scrub jays are curious by nature. This curiosity lets us get close to appreciate them. Up close, we see the sky blue feathers on their head, wings, and tail, their blue-gray necklace and smoky gray body. Males and females look pretty much the same to us humans, although males are slightly bigger. Florida scrub jays are omnivores. Main menu items are insects and acorns. But scrub jays will also try to eat anything smaller than them, like lizards, small snakes, or mice. Scrub jays forage by hopping along the ground, inside shrubs, and on tree limbs. The scrub jay's long, muscular legs are perfect for hopping and weaving through the scrub. Insects become less abundant during Florida's dry winter, so scrub jays switch over to eating mostly acorns. But acorns are only available in the fall. So where do they find them in the winter? Well, scrub jays are so smart, they've developed a food storage solution. Jays pluck acorns from oak trees in the fall. Then they bury them individually in open patches of sand. One Florida scrub jay can cache around 8,000 acorns in a single fall. Caching is like canning or freezing seasonally available fruits and vegetables for later use. Scrub jays recover and eat most acorns from their secret subterranean stash. Pretty amazing, huh? Can you imagine burying 8,000 treats in the sand, coming back 6 months later to find them? I'm not sure I could do it with even one. Let's see if I can figure it out. Nope. Nope. 3 times, charm.
So there's our Florida scrub jays. And now we're going to connect up with Texas and see what kind of jays do they have out in Texas. Mossy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. So in Texas, we actually have a green jay, very similar to the Florida scrub jay. Our jay is very loud, noisy. It likes to mimic hawks, and it actually occurs here from south of San Antonio all the way down into Mexico. They're very beautiful birds, green, blue, with black on their face. And so we're actually going to watch a video with our Director of Education, Tina Buford, to tell us more about the green jay that we have here in South Texas.
The green jay, with its bright colors and curiosity, make it an enjoyable bird to watch. Unlike other jays, he does not have a crest on his head and is considered the tropical member of the jay family. The green jay population is stable, with a range from deep South Texas to Honduras. Its preferred habitat is dense native brush to the riparian areas of the Rio Grande Valley. They live in pairs or social groups during all seasons, while rarely wandering far from nesting areas. Their breeding season is from late March to mid-July. Both male and female build the nest, while the female is the only one who incubates the eggs for around 17 to 18 days. They usually lay around 3 to 5 eggs, which are pale gray to greenish white with brown and lavender spots. Once the hatchlings are strong enough, they become part of a security detail and defend the nest for up to 1 year. After a year, they are kicked out to find their own partner to make a family of their own. Green jays are omnivores and feed on a variety of insects, seeds, nuts, and berries. They are known to scavenge around parks or picnic tables for human scraps. A cool fact about the green jay is that they are one of the few birds that are known to use tools. They use sticks to lift up loose bark, allowing them to access the insects. Another cool fact is that they are excellent copycats. They may imitate the call of different hawks to frighten them away so that they can get their food. And now back to Archbold.
Love it. Love it. That was great. I just want to make a quick statement to say thank you for your patience when the technology isn't cooperating. Of course, we practice all these things over and over and make sure all the links are working, and then you go live, and that's show business, right? So thanks for your patience. I thought it would be appropriate to introduce the next species by getting down here on the ground. This next species, I was thinking if there was a popularity contest in the Florida scrub of which animal was most popular by the other species, by all those other species, it would be this one. It digs a burrow in the ground, in the sand out here. Those burrows can be 10, 20, even 30 feet long, and it lives in there, but other species will go in there as well. I'm wondering what I'm talking about. It is a gopher tortoise, and they are super cool. So we have a film we're going to pop up here. It's called Queen of Red Hill. The full film is about 20 minutes long. Check it out later on YouTube, and then of course you can get the higher resolution once you're on YouTube later. So we're going to pull the video up and show you the first about 4 minutes.
From the heavens above, the Lake Wales Ridge looks like a sandy tail. Here, ancient dunes form hilly terrain. On these sands is one of the world's rarest ecosystems called the Florida scrub. Biologists from Archbold Biological Station study the special plants and animals. One of those animals is a gopher tortoise known as 21. That number was painted on her shell by Archbold researchers in 1968. She is the Queen of Red Hill. She has presided over her Sandhill Kingdom for more than 6 decades. Her reign began in the 1950s when Florida was a different place. Before NASA
We have ignition.
and Florida's population boom.
Florida's superb climate, beaches, and way of life attract people like a magnet. Approximately 20 million tourists pour into the state each year. Many who vacation in Florida return to live.
Today, The drive to Red Hill feels like a ride on a gentle roller coaster. Up and down, you pass over orange groves draped over the hills. Then, the final ascent up to Red Hill, rising to 210 feet. These old sands are an orange-red tint, stained by ancient mineral deposits. From one of the highest spots on peninsular Florida, you can see the tiny extent of the native sandhill. In this patch of old Florida, there are pines and hickories standing above the palmettos and oaks. This is the home of the Queen of Red Hill. Walking across these old dunes to her burrow is a struggle. Upon arrival, she is nowhere to be found. She emerges from her home on her time. So you wait. Your mind wanders over the minutes, or is it hours? Finally, the queen emerges out of her sandy underworld and into the light. She sits outside her burrow to warm her body. When ready, she ventures out to graze grasses and fruits on this protected hilltop, as she has for more than 60 years. This is a film about the gopher tortoises of Red Hill and the special people whose vision and dedication made this story possible. A story about time, then and now. The deliberate pace of a tortoise.
All right, well, that's our gopher tortoise here in Florida. Mossy, what do you have out there in Texas for us?
Hi, everyone. So I'm actually inside our research barn. So one of the cool things that the East Foundation partnered with to accomplish is with Texas A&M and their biodiversity research and teaching collection. So we actually have mammals and birds and reptiles that different researchers collected to give us a biodiversity idea of what we have here on East Foundation lands. So I actually have with me a Texas tortoise. Let me these were some specimens collected by Texas A&M and the biodiversity research. And so Texas, it's the only tortoise in Texas. And in 1977, they were protected because they are a threatened species. Very unique and very similar to the gopher tortoise here in Texas. So we actually have a video that talks a little bit more about the Texas tortoise.
The Texas tortoise can be found throughout southern Texas, as well as northeastern Mexico. All 6 ranch properties of the East Foundation are home to the Texas tortoise. Of the 4 species of tortoises found in North America, the Texas tortoise is the only one found in Texas. In 1977, the Texas tortoise was recognized as threatened, which means it is protected by state law and is illegal to collect and possess them. The Texas tortoise is the smallest of the North American tortoises, reaching a shell length of about 8.5 inches. They have a top speed of 8 km per hour and a lifespan of 60 years. They mature slowly and may not be ready to successfully breed until they are 10 years old, but their age is not the determining factor. Rather, it is their size. Their reproduction season is during the months of June through September, with incubation lasting in between 88 and 118 days. Unlike the gopher tortoise in Florida, which can have up to 25 hatchlings, the Texas tortoise carry only 2 to 3 eggs. The plates, or scutes as they call them, of their shells are yellowish orange and horned, and they have columnar hind legs like an elephant. Its shell is sensitive to the touch, because it has nerve endings. Kind of strange when you think of their hard shells and them being able to feel just like we feel when something touches our skin. Cool, huh? Another cool fact is that they smell with their throat. As with other reptiles, they can detect the faintest smell with its vomeronasal organ. They pump their throats to circulate air through its nose and around its mouth. Have you ever seen them do this? Well, now you know what they're doing. Different from the gopher tortoise, the Texas tortoise is an omnivore, which means they eat both plants and insects. Both are prevalent in their preferred habitat, which is dry scrub and grasslands in a semi-arid climate with sandy soils. The Texas tortoise benefits from East Foundation's grazing management plan because it encourages the growth of their preferred food, which is the prickly pear. The lack of rain in deep South Texas is no problem for the Texas tortoise. They can extract nutrients and water from the tiniest morsels. Their gut works as a double digestive tract, separating water from waste. Where water is scarce, their bodies hold on to water and excretes only urates, which comes out as what looks like white toothpaste. One last characteristic that differentiates the Texas tortoise from the gopher tortoise is that they do not burrow like the gopher tortoise, even though they both live in sandy soils. They do not burrow, rather they use their front legs and the sides of their shells to push away soil and debris to make shallow resting place, known as a pallet.
I love seeing the footage of the tortoise eating the prickly pear cactuses. And we have prickly pear cactuses out here too. So that's another thing people don't even expect when they visit Florida to see cactuses. I've actually got a gopher tortoise burrow right next to me. See if I can get this on the video. You see this down here? This is kind of a small one, maybe like I guess a medium sized tortoise burrow right there. Pretty cool. Our last species before we get to the Q&A is a species that you don't usually see here in the Florida scrub, but it is one of those iconic Florida heartland species that you find in the prairies around here. I'm up on high ground in the sandy high ground in Florida, but if I hiked another couple miles, if I hiked 3 miles that way, then I would be off of the ridge into the prairie area, lots of grasses, open spaces, and I would start to see this next species, which is the caracara. So we are going to actually flip our talk and first have Mossy talk about caracara, and then we have a caracara biologist who's going to hop on with us in a few minutes. All right, Mossy.
Yes, so caracaras, in my personal opinion, I think are a very smart raptor. And so we actually have 2 specimens here in our natural history collection. And they are eagle. This is a Crested Caracara. They spend a lot of their time walking, and you can see that because they have these strong feet, much like a chicken. And so one of the cool things about these caracara, primarily on carrion, highways, Texas is a big state, but carrion. And so they usually congregate with turkey vultures and black vultures. And I always feel like the caracaras are the first to kind of leave the scene when you're driving by. I think that might be an indicator of how smart they are. So
well, I'm proud to introduce one of the researchers that's been coming out to Archbold and to Buck Island Ranch for many a year to study the caracara here. So Joan Morrison, Dr. Joan Morrison, if you want to get your video up, and we'll stick a photo up on here too, so you can see a picture of a live caracara in its habitat. So Joan, are you there? Are you
I'm
with us?
here. I'm here.
Hey,
Hey.
hi.
Good
Tell us a
morning,
little bit
everybody.
about your work here and about caracaras.
Yeah, I wish I was there right now in Florida, because this is right about the time the caracaras start nesting there. Everybody thinks that birds nest in the spring, but in Florida, caracaras nest for almost the entire year. They start in October, November, and can nest even into April and May of the following spring. So they nest quite a long time there. Ozzy was right. They're very smart birds. They are raptors. They're technically falcons, related somehow to the kestrels and peregrine falcons and other falcons, but not closely. They're in what's called a subfamily, which is a little bit genetically different from the rest of those other falcons. In fact, right now, one of my colleagues is doing some genetic work to try to understand the genetic differences of the Florida caracara population to other caracaras in Texas, in Arizona. Yes, believe it or not, they live in Arizona, which is obviously completely different from Texas and Florida. And they're also mostly a southern species. In the southern hemisphere, they live in Central America and also in South America. So we're lucky to have only a few of these birds up here in North America in our southern tier, Arizona, Texas, and Florida. In terms of the pasture habitats that they seem to like, in the Pleistocene, a lot of Florida probably was prairie. As Dustin was saying, off the ridge into the lower wetland areas was probably what we call native dry or wet prairie. And it was very wet during the rainy season, and then during the winter time became dry. Well, obviously there were no cattle in Florida during the Pleistocene. So what was there to keep the prairie open? Probably big herbivores like bison and some camels perhaps, and other species that did the same kinds of things that cattle do, graze the grasses and keep the habitat real short, because caracaras do like to walk around. They do more walking than flying and killing things with their feet like other raptors do. So people think, well, that's kind of strange for a raptor. They look a little bit more like chickens, but they do. They walk around on the short grass, and along with eating carrion, they eat just about everything. They eat insects and reptiles and amphibians and fish. They wade into the shallow wetlands in the pastures and grab little fish with their feet or with their beaks. They flip over cow pies, which is really funny to watch. They flip with their feet, and the cow pies flip over, and underneath are worms, and they will eat those worms. So they really do prosper in places where there's a lot of nutrients provided by the cattle, who poop everywhere and provide a lot of nutrients in those pastures, and those nutrients provide resources for a lot of other species that the caracaras can eat. Now, a lot of people think about raptors as being migratory, and we all watch the Hawk Watch places that count the raptors that fly over those places every fall and every spring. But caracaras don't migrate. Caracaras are what we call resident species. They stay in Florida and in Texas and Arizona all year. They don't leave. And so we've been able to follow them year round with our telemetry work. We've put some transmitters on the birds and track them, and find that the pairs are very faithful to each other, kind of like the scrub jays. They stay together as a pair. They stay in their territory all year. They defend the territory against other caracaras and other birds. And so they're very easy to find if you know where to look for them in Florida, and probably Texas too, in those places where they're very faithful to their nesting areas. They have a really unusual call. I don't know whether, too bad we couldn't play one for you, but if you look it up online and look on Cornell's website or other places where they have bird information, you can hear, it's kind of like, I think of those Halloween rattles that you rattle around and around with your hand. It sounds like that. It's very unusual for a raptor. And they throw their head back and make that rattle, and it's very cool to watch. And sometimes they'll do that when they're arguing with vultures over a carcass or over access to some food. They have one brood a year, typically, very cute little chicks, sometimes two, sometimes three, but sometimes birds will nest twice during the year, which I did not expect. The more I study these birds, the more they surprise me with something. And one of the things we discovered was that sometimes pairs can make two broods successfully every year. And that's not typical for raptors. Raptors typically have a very long breeding season and wouldn't have enough time to make two broods. But in the nice climate of Florida during the wintertime, apparently there are enough resources and enough time for them to do that. Caracaras in Florida are isolated. We talked a little bit about isolated populations, and probably during the Pleistocene, they did occur all across the Gulf. into Texas and even Louisiana and Alabama, those southern places. Every once in a while, a few pairs show up in those places today, but probably during the Pleistocene were more common around the Gulf. And again, as the sea level rose after the ice ages and all the ices melted, then the Florida population became isolated. And that's why they're currently listed, because they don't have any other new individuals coming in to keep the genetic diversity of the population high. So that's one of the questions we're asking in the genetic study, is how diverse is the population and how different is it from Texas and from Arizona? And part of the reason they're threatened in Florida is because of their habitat. You know, it's so important to keep these ranches and natural places available for wildlife in Florida and Texas and other places. And so the ranch habitats are becoming very special and often are being lost to urban development or agricultural expansion. And that's partly why the caracara is having trouble right now in Florida, is that their habitat is kind of becoming smaller. I think about it like a fishbowl. If you had a bunch of fish in a fishbowl and you kept making the fishbowl smaller and smaller, you'd have an awful lot of fish with not a lot of places for them to be. So that's why the caracaras are listed in Florida. We've been studying the population there for over 25 years now. And currently we're still focusing on birds nesting and understanding how they respond to all those land use changes. So I hope to talk to some of you soon in the question period.
Thanks so much, Joan. That was really interesting. I definitely learned things there. That concludes the first part of our presentation, taking a look at some of those species, and we're going to move on to the Q&A in a minute. Before I do, I just want to say it was wonderful to have you here. We have students. I know that we've got something like 100, I think it's high school students in Texas that are on here, and hopefully you've got some good questions ready to go. And I was looking through the list of names. I noticed we had, there's an artist, Deborah Mitchell, who we work with, and she does beautiful artwork out here. She's on there. I noticed some scientists that we work with are on here. So that's one of my favorite things about virtual programs. Sometimes we'll have 5-year-olds as well as university professors who are, you know, an expert on some Florida biology thing, all together, just enjoying nature, enjoying lifelong learning together. So if your class does need to head off to, if you have another subject you've got to move on to, that's okay. Don't feel bad. But the best part is what's about to happen. That's the question and answer period. So if all our panelists you can all turn your videos on, and it'd be nice, I think, if we all go and introduce ourselves. We've already had Joan introduce herself, and we've met me and Mossy. But Tina, I don't think you didn't introduce yourself yet. So do you want to say hi?
Sure. Hi everybody from Florida and all those across Texas that are joining us. We really appreciated partnering with Archbold Research Station. Tremendous information. I think it's beneficial for all of us to know that there are species that are very similar, even though we are so far apart. So I'm the Director of Education for the East Foundation, and happy to be here. I'd like to pass it off to Dr. Neil Wilkins to have him introduce himself. He's our President and CEO of East Foundation.
Hi, good morning. I'm Neil Wilkins. Really happy to work with you guys over in Florida. I spent a lot of time in Florida and spent time tromping around the Lake Wales Ridge. So I miss that area, but I'm glad that we can share our fauna with you back and forth. I'll pass it off to whoever's next.
Well, maybe I could pick up there. This is Hilary Swain. I'm the director at Archbold Biological Station. I'm at best a backup panelist. You've got some great people here, but it's wonderful to work with the East Foundation. They hosted myself and Director of Agroecology, Betsy Boughton, not very long ago, and we just loved our trip out there. And I really love the phrase, we're a little bit of the West that's left out in the East. I often think about that. So it's lovely to see you all, and welcome everybody else. And happy to try and answer some questions. This is our first time at having a go at this, so maybe we'll try it again on something else.
Yeah. And I should give credit to Hillary because that is definitely her phrase that I ripped off of her because it's so good. It's a little bit of the West that got stuck in the East. So I haven't seen the Q&A list. I'm going off my phone. It's a little tougher. So Laura, do we have anything in there? And if you're at a school, or you don't have to be one of the students, anybody, type your questions in the Q&A or on the chat. If you're on Facebook, put your question right on Facebook, and we have a moderator who's copying those questions in here for us.
Okay, we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. Linda Getty's here, and she asked, does the gopher tortoise have nerve endings in its shell? She said it's interesting that the Texas tortoise has these. Does the gopher tortoise have them?
I don't know. And we're missing our gopher tortoise expert. So I think I'll have to take a pass on that. But what I'd like to do is look up the answer for you and check with Betsy Rothermill, who's our gopher tortoise expert, and get back to you on that one. The gopher tortoise shell is keratin, the surface of it, the scutes, which are, the same sort of thing that fingernails and things are made of. And I can tell you one very interesting story about gopher tortoise shells. We have a specialist moth here, and it's actually also, there are other congeners, related species of this moth out west, and it specializes on eating the shells of dead gopher tortoises. So it's in the clothes moth family, the same ones that your great aunt used to moan about, eating their woolly sweaters and things in closets. And this special little moth lives in a little silken tube in the sand and comes up and eats the keratin from the shell. And the idea is that's a very specialized habit. But maybe it wasn't so specialized, because the other things it eats is the horns of, like cattle, and probably also bison and some of those other horned animals that used to be around in the Pleistocene. So you never know what you're going to find when you start looking at gopher tortoises or desert tortoises. And I wonder if you have a similar moth to the one that recycles tortoise shells in Florida. We'll have to follow up on that.
All right, thank you.
And if we have questions that we're not sure of, we'll answer from somebody who knows, and we will send an email Friday, so it won't go out today, but we'll send an email next week with all of the answers to everybody who registered on the Zoom, to all those extra answers. And I just want to add one part there, because we do have so many students on, that it's really important that she's a preeminent scientist. She's very well respected all over the world. You notice her answer was, I don't know. That's okay. I think sometimes.
Uh-oh, I think we lost Dustin for a minute. So I'll ask the next question that he actually asked during the Texas tortoise video while he's reconnecting. He said, ouch, how do they not get stuck with the cactus spines when they're eating the prickly pear? Is it just kind of a luck thing in between the spines, or do they have any sort of technique?
I think they do get stuck.
Yeah.
I mean, look on that video itself, you'll see that the spines are, stuck into the jaws of one of the tortoises. And lots of animals get, they just have a trade-off. But white-tailed deer will do that. They will eat and almost get drunk on fermented cactus. And so that's a trade-off for them. And javelina will do the same thing, and cattle will do the same thing. And it's just a trade-off. They're willing to trade the food resource for the uncomfortable fact of getting stuck by a spine.
And then the other thing is, there's not just the big, powerful spines, but there's also lots of little, very small spines. If you've ever handled a cactus pad, you know all about those. I think we've had more accidents with cactus pads than anything else at Archbold, people standing on them, getting stuck by them. So they obviously, the other trade-off is, actually eating those very small, very quite irritating spines. So they have two ways of coping, avoiding the big, getting stuck on the big ones, and managing with the small ones.
when I first moved to Florida, like just moved here, never having interacted with cactus, I saw a fruit on a prickly pear and thought, well, that looks great. And I ate it and I didn't know about the tiny little spines. And so my lips were all in pain for about an hour or so. They're very hard to pull out. Just maybe as a story I shouldn't tell, but I always think of that.
I think
Okay,
some
next
of the creatures,
question.
some of the creatures that evolved with these things just have, like Hillary said, ways of coping. I wonder how I see caracaras in Arizona standing on the top of saguaro cactuses, and they have pretty big spines. I actually stood up one day too quickly underneath an arm and got some spines in my head, and that was not fun. But they've evolved with these things for so long. They have ways of coping. They have tougher feet, or they just endure the pain, or they have enzymes in their system that digest those little teeny spines, things that we don't have as people, but they are pretty good at dealing with those kinds of things in nature.
Great. So the next question is from Caroline, and she asks, is the green jay as closely related to the Florida scrub jay as to the California scrub jay?
Gosh.
So the answer to that is no. The green jay and the Florida scrub jay are actually in two different genuses, and the scrub jays themselves are all in the same genus, I believe.
Yes, but they are separate species. So for a long time, it was always thought that the Florida scrub jay was some kind of subspecies. And the genetics work now separates it out from the other ones, the Western jay, which is the California jay, and then the island jay. There's a special jay that lives on an island, and the Mexican jay. They're all in the same genus, the same sort of grouping as the Florida scrub jay. So genetically, they are all quite different. But one of the amazing things we found, and I put it in the chat, is when we ran the genetics, the genetical difference between the little patches of Florida scrub jay, each one on one of those ancient sandy ridges in Florida, and there are 11 little populations left. It's very threatened. The genetic differences among those 11 populations were more extreme than the difference between the Florida jay and the California jay. So it just shows how being really isolated and stuck on these ancient ridges ends up with very different, strong genetic differences, more strong than being separated by an entire continent. So one of the great things about genetics is that nowadays modern ecologists work a lot with geneticists. So this is lab work and field work combined. And those two approaches are just opening our eyes to things we never thought about before. Now it's like, just like the same way that you can find your family relatives around the world, we are understanding more and more about the ecology of plants and animals in the wild from understanding their genetics. It's really bringing together molecular biology. If you're interested in molecular biology, you can still be working on big environmental problems, because that understanding is really helping us understand the environment at the same time as field work out in the field does. So there's a place for everybody.
So, Hillary, for about 3 seconds, your sound dropped out. Right on your punchline, I was saying, what was the result of the one looking at the differences between Florida ones and the ones west?
Okay, I'll try this again. There was more difference among the 11 Florida subpopulations than there was between the Florida populations and the California population. So those little isolated subpopulations, groups in Florida, were more different from each other than they were in together from the California jays. And that's pretty extraordinary. It shows the power of isolation when it comes to evolution.
I have a question for you then, Hillary. Yes, that was good. But so my question is, do you think, I don't think in a practical way this would happen, but are there really 11 Florida subspecies or species of scrub jays that just aren't recognized?
It didn't go that far.
How would you see?
Well, I can send you the paper, which is a pretty tough read, actually, Justin. But the conclusion was they really were not significant enough differences to recognize as a different species. But they're definitely different genetically.
And their behavior is all the same too.
Their voices as well, their calls different from each subpopulation. So, very surprising. There's a great question for Joan, which we should ask, which is a follow-up question.
Yes. Do you want to ask it? I'll ask it.
No, you ask it.
All right. Well, Betsy asked this on Facebook. She asked, how do crested caracaras in Texas differ from those in Florida? Are there any genetic or behavioral differences?
Well, in terms of genetic differences, stay tuned. That information is coming very shortly from our colleagues in Arizona who are doing that work right now. It's interesting that for this bird being so cool and so unusual, there really hasn't been a lot of work done on it. I'm kind of the only one who's ever really studied this bird, me and my students, and we've really only focused in Florida. So there really haven't been any in-depth scientific studies in Texas to understand things like behavioral differences and timing of reproduction and things like that, and certainly not genetics. But right now, my colleagues in Arizona are studying. They have samples from Florida, from Texas, from Arizona, from Mexico to look at those genetic differences. And so stay tuned, we should have that pretty soon. In terms of behavior, again, we don't really know. I know a lot of people, probably at the East Foundation, have recorded all kinds of behaviors of caracaras, but we've never communicated and talked about similarities or differences. And I really hope we can do that in the future. I think it would be really cool to do more studies of caracaras there because they are so common and they seem to be doing really well in Texas. So I think there's a lot of room for more study on those populations, and it would be really interesting to understand some more of those similarities and differences. So I hope we can do that. Hope that answered your question.
I think one of the similarities that we have between our caracaras in Texas and those in Florida is a nesting behavior. So caracaras are technically falcons, and it's one of the only falcons, and it may be the only falcon that builds its own nest.
It is.
And that is similar in Texas to how caracaras behave in Florida. Is that correct, Joan?
That is correct. It is the only falcon species that actually constructs a nest. Kestrels, peregrines, the other falcons use a scrape, or kestrels will nest in a box. Others will just lay an egg on a rock, maybe put a few feathers down, but not actually build a nest the way the crested caracaras do. The other similarity I was thinking about is that they're very social. They're an incredibly social species. And although the breeding pairs are very territorial and they don't like other caracaras in their nesting area, when they're not nesting, they'll be in big groups, sometimes 50 or 60, and they'll move around together, they'll forage together, they'll interact and do the rattling and jump on each other and play. I've seen them play. I saw a caracara punch out a vulture once. They do all kinds of really interesting things together. They're a very, very social species. So that's interesting too.
Right. We've had a large expansion of their range in Texas. So they at one time were isolated to just southern Texas, but as there's been some perhaps climatological changes, their range has expanded into the central portion of the state.
Very interesting.
Okay. So we have time for a couple more questions. We have one from Greg on Facebook for our Texas colleagues. Are feral pigs a problem in Texas rangelands? Are they recognized as a problem by ranch owners?
So yeah, that's a big yes. Feral, if we could twitch our nose and have feral hogs gone out of Texas, we would do it. So there's millions of dollars spent every year just trying to reduce or eliminate or manage feral swine so that they not only are they a problem in damaging crops and everything from golf courses to cornfields, but they're a threat to our native ecosystems, and they're a big reservoir of disease. And that is something that is a huge concern for us, over and above the physical damage that they do to the ecosystem. I imagine in Florida, a similar answer probably comes.
Yeah, we have a very similar and, should be doing more work comparing story. So we have a large group who have been working on wildlife diseases, and particularly the linkage between disease in feral swine or wild hogs and livestock, cattle, and potential interactions with human health. So this is a lot of work looking at genetics, looking at a whole range of diseases. The colleague who's working on that, her name is Sam Wisely, and the other colleague is Raoul Boughton. So very extensive work on wildlife diseases. The other thing we've installed recently for people who are interested is we have, well, in the last 5 years, Raoul Boughton, eminent researcher, has installed a network of 40 cameras over the ranch that are in a grid, not the ones that usually go to your favorite spot and see what's coming there, but this is a systematic grid over our working cattle ranch, very similar to the East Foundation, but only 10,500 acres in size. And on those 40 cameras, we're picking up all animals, of course, many cows, but then also the full range of predators and prey. So we're getting a much better picture of the sort of structure of the, you could call it the food chain of predators and prey, everything from turkeys and raccoons and possums, all the way up to bears and panthers and bobcats and otters, and a lot of feral swine. So we're very excited. We've had 1 million images a year coming in from those 40 cameras. We've, I think we're in the last, Raoul is pulling in the last year of images to do the analysis. We're now using a new computer program, artificial intelligence, to help us identify all these animals. And we're really excited to sort of understand where are feral pigs on the ranch? Which areas are they? Are they present with or without cows? How does that interact with other predators on the ranch? And that's going to be particularly important in Florida as the Florida panther is beginning to move north. So it gives us a great baseline for assessing big changes in predator communities over time. So that was a great question. We're both worried about feral hogs. We don't want them, but they're a very, very interesting thing to study. And the other thing you need to know is they carry a lot of ticks, and those ticks carry a lot of diseases. So that's another interaction there. Sorry, went on too long, but great question.
That was a great question. So we have one more question. It is 11 o'clock. If everyone wants to agree to just answer the one last question, is that okay? All right. So Linda asked a follow-up question on the jays. Did I understand that the green jays kick out their kids after a year? I think the Florida scrub jay kids hang out until they find a territory or mate, don't they?
Well, I'll confirm that the Florida scrub jay, the offspring from 1 year, will often stay anything from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, even up to 6 years within the family territory, helping to protect it and playing a key role in watching out for predators. They do wait until there's a little gap in the ecosystem, if you want. Think of it as a village, and you need to find, a house you can move into or a territory you can move into. So they're waiting in the wings for an opportunity, possibly a new mate or a new territory. They don't move very far. I am not so familiar, I am not familiar with the situation with the green jays, so I'd love to hand it over to you all. But definitely the Florida scrub jays are the most cooperative of the cooperative jays, and they're called cooperative breeders because the young from 1 year are cooperating in a family group to help to raise subsequent young.
Yes, so the green jay does. After they have their young typically stay there for about a year. They help protect the nest, and then as soon as the next group comes along, they're kicked out and need to go find a home of their own.
So there's some very interesting work comparing how cooperative are all of these different jays, and more importantly, why? What is it about Florida? Is it just really tough habitat, tough to find a spot? So, that you're making the best of a bad job and just hanging around in a territory until a slot becomes available? These are really deep questions that are actually easy to ask and hard to answer.
I think we're going to wrap it up there. You might have noticed that I got up and moved because it was raining on me. and I walked about 100 feet, and it's not. It's I mean, it's beautiful out here. So that's a little bit of streaming. I was like, it feels good, but I don't want my phone to get wet. But anyways, thank you to all the people who came on and participated. The students, people from around the country, but also wasn't this really cool to have researchers from around the country on at the same time answering questions? So thank you very much, Joan, Hillary, Neil, and the East Foundation team. This was the East Foundation's idea. Loved it. It was so much fun. So thank you all, and have a good day.
Goodbye, everyone. Have a great day.
Goodbye. You guys.